Hi, it's time for the Mark Taylor Show. I'm Mark Taylor, and my guest today is Dennis Legere. Thanks for coming on, Dennis.
Thanks for having me.
Dennis and I go back a few years. We worked together back in the late 1999. No, before 99, I guess it would have been 97, probably. I guess
97,
we started.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
And Dennis is a singer-songwriter from way back. When did you start playing music?
I guess I started playing when I was quite young, just around the house with my family. My mother is a musician and has always been.
This is in Bathurst, right?
Up in Bathurst,
yep.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So my mother was very involved with music in the Bathurst area. And
she was in a singing group, right? Was she not?
She was, yeah, that's right. They were called the Ward Sisters.
Okay.
So they
her and her sisters were.
They had there was herself and her sister Shirley and her other sister Norma. So the three of them. And then they had a brother as well, Stephen, my uncle Stephen, and he was fairly well accomplished as a musician as well.
Okay.
He played in a band around Fredericton in the 70s called Barker House Rally.
Okay.
And they did well in those days. So yeah, I grew up.
Put a little bit of money in your jeans.
Yeah, I think it helped him get through his undergraduate degree at St. Thomas.
Yeah.
But so yeah, music has been just a big part of my family. My grandfather was a fiddle player.
Okay.
And so just yeah, it was just something I grew up kind of doing.
Did you take any lessons?
Yeah, piano was kind of like math.
That's where you started?
Yeah, it was just another course that we took.
Right.
So yeah, I took piano with the sisters, the nuns up in Bathurst.
Okay.
My brother and sister also went through that program. So I think it was 6 or 7 years doing.
Quite rigid, I guess it would be an education.
Yeah, they were very systematic in their approach to music, but they were kind. They were. I wouldn't say rigid. But we did follow a program,
right.
And it was very. There was always theory involved. And
had homework to do.
Always,
once a week.
It was once a week piano lessons, and then there was also for a few years we did theory lessons. So that was the second session.
Okay.
And you'd go in. That was more of a classroom setting, and in hindsight, that probably gave me a good base of understanding of how music is put together.
Right. Yep.
So you did some sight reading. They would play notes on a piano, and you would have to write them down without looking at the piano. So.
And you were just a young boy at the time?
Yeah,
how old would you have been?
I guess I was between grade 1 and I think it was in grade 8 when my mother finally said, okay, it's up to you whether you want to carry on or not.
Right.
So at that point, but she said she wanted me, she always, her and my father were adamant at least to stay in some sort of music.
Right.
So that was when the school band program was starting, and a saxophone at that time seemed a lot more appealing than playing the piano.
Kind of like Maggie on The Simpsons.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
but I'm gonna. What I'm going through my head is, if you're a young boy, don't you just want to get at the piano and get going, like to sit and read and study? Was it boring for you?
Well, yeah, I guess it probably was. It did feel like work at the time.
Right, because it was like you go to school all day.
You go to school all day,
and you had enough of that. And
the music that we were playing was classical music, and that's really I was listening to.
Wasn't Jerry Lee Lewis or anything like that?
Ozzy Osbourne. Yeah, it was. We were in the '80s. It was metal music that was probably more appealing to me. So that was hard to transfer that to the piano.
Exactly.
So no, it felt like just like school.
Right.
But then as I got into junior high and started to take that knowledge, the saxophone, I was able to play a little bit more music that may have been popular at the time.
Right.
So that music took on a different tone there. Now I watch my son playing now, and in the 80s it was all about guitar.
Right.
Really, it was wild solos.
And you're talking electric as well.
Electric guitar, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Piano, there was a lot of synthesizer music and all, but what's interesting I see now is that watching my son, now he does sit down and he plays piano for and is excited to sit down and play the piano, but the music, there's a lot more piano in today's popular music. I think a Coldplay is one that he tends to follow, a lot of piano in that.
Yep.
So he tends to sit down, and even though he's taking classical lessons, he tends to spend more time just
playing popular stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, that's the stuff that it's cool, right? I mean,
it's a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
And I think, geez, learning music or trying to learn a song, we'd put a tape in or a cassette, and you'd fast forward, stop, and as you learned it, bit by bit.
You didn't have the internet where you could go and find some.
Yeah.
What the chords are in that song?
Yeah, it's so accessible now.
Yeah,
It's pretty neat. I do it myself. If there's a song that I've always wanted to learn.
It tells you where the capo goes and everything.
It's very accessible.
And if you get it on a good site that it's reliable, it's not bad. I mean, some of them you play them, you go, whoa, I don't think so.
Wrong key.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so it's interesting watching him go through it and comparing it to when I was starting to learn popular music. So
when you get into a band at school, that's the school band. Did you get out in the public and go in a band with your buddies or anything like that and start doing that right away, or is that further down the road?
I think that was it might have been maybe grade 9, grade 10. That's when we had, I guess, my first garage band.
Garage band, that's what I was going to call it.
And I was playing piano at that time. I hadn't picked up a guitar yet at that point. It was they wanted a keyboard player.
Okay.
And again, a lot of synthesizer music.
Yep.
And so that was the stuff I was playing. I had my first synthesizer, and we had a garage band. And then we did a few.
Did you get some gigs out of it?
Yeah, we got.
Wow.
We got a few gigs, yeah. We did I remember junior high
paying
dance.
Gigs?
No. Well, not that or maybe the singer took the cut, but no, we were just like school.
Probably your agent, man. That's where I'd go looking for the money first.
Exactly. But we did a school dance, and
oh, really?
Yeah, I think we got booed off the stage. We were trying to do "Run to the Hills" by Iron Maiden.
Okay.
And I don't think it sounded much like "Run to the Hills."
Did it? But it sounded like that to you.
Oh yeah, to us it sounded.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we had much of a monitor system either, so we might have all been playing 3 different songs or 4 different songs.
Right on. Well, when you're learning music, the first time somebody comes and you play them something that you can remember they say, "Hey, that sounds like."
Yeah.
That's one of the things where it grabs you there, and you actually can play something that people
they recognize. That's right,
and that's where it goes, and that's kind of feeds you then, because then it opens up an appetite that you want to learn a whole pile of songs. Is what you got to get going.
Yeah.
That's get your career going.
Yeah, exactly.
So your first public performance was in school. Did you go out after you went to university, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Fredericton, UNB?
UNB in Fredericton. That's
okay.
Right, yeah.
And do you get in bands up there?
Yeah, I guess that's where I started to.
An actual band that people would listen to.
Well, I started more doing solo stuff, I guess.
Okay.
I'd picked up the guitar somewhere along I think it was by accident, if I recall how this all happened. The band I was playing synthesizer in, or playing some music with, they said, "Can you learn the solo for a particular song?" And I think it was an April Wine song.
Okay.
So I just assumed that it was a guitar solo. So I went home and picked up. I had a nylon string guitar. I went home and I just learned it. Figured out how to play it on the guitar. I was playing a little violin at the time and kind of translated what I knew.
And you knew a few chords?
I knew a little bit of chording at that point.
Yeah,
that's right, because I used to chord along a little bit with my grandfather when I was playing fiddle. So I went home, I learned the solo it wasn't a very complicated one.
Okay.
But learned it on the guitar, went back to the next garage band, garage practice with the garage band that we were in. And the guy said, "Okay, let's do that song." So I went to get the guitar, and they said, "What are you doing? What are you doing getting the guitar?" Well, so you asked me to learn the song on the solo on the guitar. And like, "No, we thought you could learn it on the keyboard and play it on the keyboard." But it kind of got me started on playing guitar.
So by accident?
Just kind of by accident. I kind of like this. So I continued playing, and then by the time university came around, I think it was my first year, I had learned a handful of songs that were pub type songs.
Okay.
And
some Neil Young or something like that?
Yeah, a lot of Neil Young,
John
Prine, Bob Dylan, and
the folk guys, basically.
Folk guys, folk music, which was really, my mother was, had a lot of influence there growing up of that style of music as well. So.
So did you get into songwriting right away, or were you just doing covers for? You're doing covers by yourself, right? You're doing some solo stuff.
Yeah, I did write. If I think of when I started writing songs, I wrote a song for my graduation year, and
Did you perform it at the graduation?
I played it at one of our ceremonies.
Okay.
And, I don't think I'll ever play it again. I don't know if I'd even remember it, but that was my first.
Was it well received? Is that what you're telling me?
I think that, well, they were awfully kind if they received it okay. But I think of the lyrics in hindsight, the few that I remember, and
was it like Spaceship Superstar or stuff like that? Or
close to that?
Oh,
yeah.
is that right? Okay.
But so I guess in grade 12 I would have technically wrote my first song. But,
okay.
I think I started taking it a little more seriously in the first and second year university when I started to listen, really in earnest to, singer-songwriters like Bob Dylan. And,
right. Because I mean, you're talking the '80s here, which was Men Without Hats and stuff like that. That populated the airwaves, right?
Yeah, I guess so I went to my first year university was '89.
Well, okay, we're getting past that. I guess.
Little bit, yeah. And
it was still there, but
Neil Young was very popular.
Yep.
And I guess the whole Celtic movement with the Rankin family. Really making strides. There was a real focus, I guess, and then Eric Clapton came out with his Unplugged around the same time.
Right.
So acoustic music and unplugged music really started to...
A little bit quieter.
Yeah, and started to take off. So the pub scene was, and I think it still is, but I know in those days it was quite, it was a good time. It was a few places in Fredericton that were, that hired
singer-songwriters.
Singer-songwriters,
yeah. You could go. So when you get doing your songwriting, were you doing it alone, or did you collaborate with anybody, or any of your songs? I guess because you got into bands, obviously later on you're doing your own tunes and stuff. Or did you write alone? Most of it.
Yeah, I guess most of it was written alone. When I lived in Fredericton, I'd say maybe in '93 or '94, I was invited to go to. It was a kind of a group of musicians that would get together on a monthly basis, once every Friday, once a month on a Friday night, and they were like a kitchen jam.
Right.
So I was invited to that, and that really spurred my interest in songwriting, because around this table, there might have been anywhere from 10 to 20 individuals that would show up at these jams, and
some were more accomplished than you, and maybe
they were all more accomplished than me.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And there was these singer-songwriters that still to this day have never recorded, and nobody's ever heard outside those kitchen walls.
Wow.
But they were really, wonderful songwriters, and I learned a ton. The one individual who had a huge influence, I think, on how I wrote music and how I ended up really wanting to write my own music was Eric LeBlanc.
Okay.
And Eric was the host of these kitchen jams, and he still has these jams.
Was it in just a regular somebody's residence?
Right in his house, yeah, in the kitchen. He ended up expanding his house after a few years, and I wonder at times if he did it just to accommodate the kitchen jams.
More of an open space is.
Yeah, yeah. But it was, and they still do get together. I've been quite delinquent on my attendance lately, but I still keep in touch with a lot of those individuals. But they were quite an influence.
Well, I got something I want to show you. I do this every week, or I try to do it every week, of things that either has to do with the guest or something that has to do with Charlotte County. I got something I want to bring out. What is this? What would you call that?
That's a coaster.
It's a coaster.
Yeah. You put your cold drink on it.
Yeah, I think you're being a little bit humble. This would be your second album you did with your band Mackinac.
Right.
Right?
Yep,
and
that's right.
you guessed 15 years ago?
Yeah, I guess it was early 2000s.
Yep.
I think we put that together.
And who was in the band with you? Or?
So in that band was, and these are the guys that I'll still play with. We don't play as much anymore, but the Richard Frenette was playing bass guitar. He's a friend of mine from Bathurst. Barry Hughes was playing drums.
Okay.
And Chris Brown was the guitar player.
Okay.
And we had a few guest musicians on it, friends of ours.
Right.
That some of these.
And it's folky stuff, right?
Very folky, yeah.
Yep.
Very, very folky, and
not on the maybe borderline on country, but not quite. But it's got some flavor to it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's folk music and country music, I think.
They're distant cousins. Not really distant cousins. They're pretty close.
Yeah,
First
they're
cousins,
very close.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the songs on here, and I told you one time that one of your songs has caught fire here in Charlotte County, and it's a popular one. Every year at Moose season, it's called Moose Calls and Waterfalls. It's from this album.
Right.
And every year at Moose season, they play it. They play it, and it's just something. And I remember calling you, or I guess I was working with you at the time. I told you this guy called me up, right out of the blue, and he says, "Mark," he said, "that song, Moose Calls and Waterfalls," because I was on the radio at the time. I was doing a radio spot with a guy at the Tide in St. Stephen, 98.1. And he would play it, and he would. And one day we even did a moose call. I did a moose call on the radio with him.
Yeah.
But the guy called up and he said, "Mark, that song is Canadiana."
Yeah.
That's Canadiana, which is. He said it was quite a compliment, I thought, and he said it's better than Snowbird. And I remember telling you at the time, and of course. You're modest and sarcastic, which I guess is kind of, I don't know if it's a good combination. You said, "Well, I don't mind the comparison. I would prefer that it would be compared to Gene McClellan, who wrote Snowbird, than Anne Murray." You weren't a big fan of Anne Murray's, but anyway.
I appreciate Anne Murray. I just didn't think I sounded like her.
No. Well, the guy was saying that he thought it was better than Snowbird, which is a good thing. So you were kind enough to bring your guitar and your harmonica along. Could you strike it up for us and play it for the people of Charlotte County and across Canada, actually?
No
I guess
problem.
I told you, I don't know if I scared you when I told you this was across
A little bit.
coast to coast,
right.
but you can handle it?
I got a few friends across the nation. Maybe
Okay,
they'll see it.
and maybe some enemies too. How would we know?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's get her going. Moose Calls and Waterfalls.
Give a seed to the soil, give it water, give it light. Will it through the ground with all your might, and throw an axe through the air, handle over blade. The edge glimmers brightly on the tool of the trade. Muddy trails through the trees, rusty soul makes his way. Snowshoes, tattoo crusted snow behind the horse and sleigh. Million billets on the ground, and the mare's tail streaks the blue. And the bulls out on the vista share a devastating view. This is deep river, up river, wind so cold it makes us shiver. Moose calls, waterfalls, 2 days far from shopping malls. They go drifting and lifting, worn out but they can sing. La 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 la. And bottle washer cooks the hearty meal, while outside all the elements make their weather deal. But underneath the canvas tent, the fiddle strikes the reel. 2 spoons rattle back and forth while the plywood takes the heel. This is deep river, up river, wind so cold it makes you shiver. Moose calls and waterfalls, 2 days far from shopping malls. They go drifting and lifting, all worn out but they can sing. La 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 la
Wonderful, Dennis. Wonderful. Good job, pal.
Well, thank you.
You had remarked that you were a little bit rusty.
A little rusty.
Well, I certainly didn't pick up on it, but do you still get together and do some gigs or anything like that?
We've played.
Was your band Mackinac or
with the
alone?
band Mackinac, yeah. We seems like we have like a once a year standing gig that we may do. Now and then we'll play twice a year, but
Okay.
we still talk about it like we still play full time.
Right.
The guys
But doing
in the
it is
band.
another thing.
Doing it is the other thing, but we've good friends with the guys that I play with, so we like to at least pretend like we're still out there
Exactly.
actively gigging.
It's another thing I wanted to ask you. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about it. That song is where did that come from? That's obviously not something that you would have probably experienced, but
Moose Calls and Waterfalls? Oh, okay. Yeah, that was my grandfather was a logger.
okay.
And I can remember my grandfather was a big influence musically, but also just in my life.
He's the guy that played the fiddle, right?
He played the fiddle, yeah, and I really looked up to him in so many ways. But he used to tell stories about the log drives
Right.
on the Nipisiguit River up in Bathurst, and
Yep.
it always used to boggle my mind that he'd be out there running these logs down the river, but he never did know how to swim.
Oh.
But there was these log camp tunes that he would sing and my mother would sing and with her sisters, and I always liked them because they just seemed like these songs that everybody could kind of join in on.
Right.
And simple melodies, everybody could join in on, and I always wanted to have just my logger tune.
Yeah.
So that's really what that was
Well,
about.
I knew,
And-
because a lot of songs, I'm sure you wrote from experience.
Yeah.
Experiences of your own.
Right.
But I knew that wasn't something you had experienced. I was just wondering how you got to that. So.
Yeah, and it was from his stories, and then I did a little bit of research, and just in some of the lingo, I have made the mistake of writing songs where the lingo wasn't quite accurate.
Okay.
And I remember talking to, actually, I think it was Eric LeBlanc had once said, when you listen to Stan Rogers' music, even though he was never a fisherman, he might have spent time on fishing vessels. He wrote like he was, and he just was very adamant about researching his music. So if
Okay.
you're going to write something that somebody else knows a heck of a lot more of than you do,
Yep.
then make sure you research it properly.
Well,
right?
I don't know. I think it's Pride in the Name of Love that you two did.
Yeah.
There's a date in there that's wrong about of how when it. I think it's
Right.
the date that it's I think it's, or maybe it's Bloody Sunday Sunday
Bloody
Bloody Sunday. I'm
Sunday.
not sure, but I think that might be what it was when it actually happened. I think they get the date wrong,
Yeah.
which is but you would
a
think
big-
you would have caught that before it went to
Right.
press.
Yeah, and I did it. Even I think on our the first recording we did, I referred to Hayton Ashbury, the famous crossroads in I think I
Yep.
referred to it as Heighton Ashbury, and that's how I sang it. And every
Yep.
time every time I would hear it afterwards, that would drive me crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Just not knowing enough about it. But
No.
so yeah, I tried to research that song enough that it sounded like I.
So you had some influences, obviously. Would be your family. It's one thing,
Yep.
and the people that you were listening to on the radio. Is there somebody that you said, "Man, I'd like to be able to do that"?
Well, after my Scorpions and Ozzy Osbourne phase, I got really Bob Dylan. I still to this day I appreciate his songwriting, his lyric writing capabilities. I think are phenomenal. But so Bob Dylan, Neil Young,
Right.
John Prine,
Yes.
they're all in the same vein. Gordon Lightfoot. I grew up.
You met
and
Gordon.
I did meet him. Yes.
Yeah. You were at Gordon's house. Is that what you
Yeah,
were telling me?
there was a long story to it, but we ended up at after one of his concerts at Massey Hall, we ended up going back there with some relatives of his, and got a chance to chat with them.
Yeah. Do a little partying with him, I guess. I mean, he
Well,
likes to unwind
I'm
after.
I'm not a partier.
Well,
but
no,
you know that.
absolutely not. No, we're not even saying that.
Yeah.
So what kind of music do you listen to now? Do the same sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I've never stopped listening to Bob Dylan and Neil Young.
He's got. Have you heard the new Basement Tapes?
So his music written, yes,
Yep.
I've listened to it a number of times now.
Yep.
I'm enjoying that.
Stuff that he
Yep.
wrote and just kind of stashed away.
Yeah. So that I think that's a really interesting recording. T-Bone Burnett produced it, right?
Yep.
So
Marcus Mumford is on it,
Yeah.
among others. I mean,
there's another one of the, I forget his name, but he plays with the band Dawes, and that's
Okay.
a band that I got into listening recently.
Yep.
I've worn the grooves out on that one.
I saw them in a Mumford and Sons video,
Oh, yeah.
like live at Red Rocks. The
Yeah.
guy from Dawes comes out and plays with them.
Oh, okay.
So they're all in the same vein, but
Yeah.
so you're quite into even the music that's out today. Is
Yeah.
there's still some good stuff being made.
I think what's happened with music and the ability to recording music now and getting it out into the public is so accessible. Even when we recorded this, and say if it was 2000, the home studios were not really. They were starting to come about, but it still took quite a bit of money. But the amount of the accessibility now to recording music, I think it's really brought it back to the musician, and it is exposed and really, I think there's been a creativity boom, because nobody, here you get a lot of talk about the creativity was often downplayed by the big labels, stifled by the big labels, and nowadays you can just have a
because if you come with your songs and you say, and if the music of the day was hard rock, they'd say, Dennis, we don't have a room for you on our label.
Right. So I think it's exposed a whole bunch of talent out there that didn't need all the money of a big label, and I mean the big labels have their place. There's no doubt, but
there's no money selling CDs now.
It's all in live performance.
Yeah,
and I think that's great,
iTunes. I guess iTunes is one thing, because people don't buy albums anymore. They buy a song. If they like a song, you can put it on your iPod or.
So you can't get away with kind of putting
like a bunch of fillers.
Right.
Like I got one hit song, and I'm going to put 10 fillers in that I've had laying around now for a while. I'll throw in a couple cover tunes.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of really good music out there now. There's been a bit of a renaissance. Wow. That's my own thought.
That's your opinion.
That's my opinion.
Hey, that's like so many things. Everybody's got one. Anyway, this time has gone by so fast. You mentioned your son.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you that you're welcome to come back and do this again. And if he wants to come along and accompany you, that would be great.
Well, he's far surpassed my abilities. He and my daughter are well on their way. But maybe we'll do that sometime. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Dennis. It's been great seeing you again. And this is another episode of The Mark Taylor Show. Thanks for joining in. And please join again next time. Thank you.